What is up, guys? Doug Polk here, and we're back with another episode of Pograms, and we're going to take a look at another hand from the Aussie Millions 100K between Fedor, Holz, and Mike Watson.
6 folds. Beat 2 raises, 15,000.
Fedor going to raise it up here at the King-Jack offsuit. Fedor certainly been our most active player at this final table. Will Mike Watson defend Queen-7 now in the big blind? Certainly a reasonable hand given the price he's getting.
2 players.
As we can see, he's 40% to win. Not terrible chances.
Our hand begins with action folding to Fedor on the button, who decides to open it up with King-Jack. The small blind folding, and Mike Watson deciding to take a flop with Queen-7 off. Definitely standard here in the big blind against a button raise. You're getting very good odds, and the button has a wide range. Let's take a flop.
Check or bet, sir.
And Mike does make the best hand here. Starts with a check. Action on Fedor here. Still hasn't acted yet. Remember, there's a 30-second shot clock for every single decision.
2 bets, 22,000.
And Mike going to continue here with his middle pair.
The flop comes 9-7-4 with 2 bigs feet. At this point, Mike checks over to Fedor, who has a decision with King-Jack. Now, you can make some reasonable arguments towards betting or checking. If you decide to bet hands like this, a problem you might face is you're going to have a lot of weak hands on the turn and river, which means you either have to bluff too much or give up too much, and those are both not that attractive. However, if you do bet and you think your opponent's unlikely to check raise you frequently, then your hand plays a little bit better, because if you realize your equity by hitting top pair, you can barrel for value, and you of course also have fold equity. So if you think your opponent's passive, it could be okay to work some bets into your game here, but in general, you also have a lot of other hands like draws you could look to bet here, like Jack 10 or 10-8 or 6-5 or clubs. Really a bunch of different hands you could choose to bluff with. So in general, I'd probably recommend don't bet this hand, but you can make a reasonable case for it. Now over to Mike Watson, and with the second pair, he has a crystal clear check call. He does so, and let's take a turn.
Check or bet, sir.
No change on the turn.
Beat 4 check.
These are our 2 chip leaders colliding here in this pot. A few more hands here of this level. And we're going to play 4,000, 8,000. That'll put some pressure on the shorter stacks. Remember, there's only 1.8 million chips in play, so that would mean there's only about, 225 big blinds in play once the level moves up. Fedor hasn't acted yet.
10 seconds.
Looks like he is going to fire a second bullet here at this pot. And all of a sudden, Queen-7's not looking so great.
Beat 2 bets.
Still, though, I don't think we're going to see Mike Watson just fold here on the turn. Club draw is still there. All the straight draws. All the straight draws. Ace-3, Ace-5, 3-5, 5-6, 6-8, 10-8, Jack-10. Man, there is a billion straight draws and a flush draw. So I don't think Watson's going to just fold here. Pretty big bet here from Fedor, too. Let's point that out. 67,000 is just about pot-sized bet on the turn. But that is not going to shake Mike Watson. He makes a great call here on the turn.
The turn is an offsuit deuce, so nothing really changes. At this point, Mike once again checks over to Fedor, and now Fedor tanks. In this situation with King Jack, I would recommend not betting because you have so many other hands I'd rather bluff with. King Jack still does have some showdown value if your opponent has a draw, so you can check back and debatably call some rivers. And additionally, you're going to have all these hands like flush draws or straight draws that you're going to want to barrel with. So again, you could make kind of the same case on the flop to bet, but I think here on the turn it's a much weaker play, as when you get called, you're generally going to be behind, and your hand now is much less likely to improve because you only get the river rather than the turn and the river. So I'd like to see Fedor check back here, but he does decide to go ahead and fire the turn. Back over to Mike with second pair. You have another pretty clear call. He's going to have plenty of draws he'd want to fold, maybe some hands like bottom pair. So when you have middle pair here, you're going to want to go ahead and call the turn. He does so. Let's take a river.
One king is dead.
Check bets.
Now that doesn't really change anything. Not really a super scary card here.
Deep four check.
200,000 chips in the pot. A ninth of the chips in play are in the middle right now. And Fedor knows that. He doesn't want to just check back. He knows if he checks, he loses. I mean, almost for sure. Very small chance that Mike has like a Jack 10 of clubs or Jack 8 of clubs kind of a hand, but that's not too likely. And man, if Fedor bets big here on the river, this is going to be an unbelievably tough spot for Mike to call.
10 seconds.
Will Fedor empty the clip here on the river and fire one more bullet? Fedor's used one of his time bank chips to think about this here.
Minute starts now.
So Fedor gets an extra minute to think about it. These are the two chip leaders colliding here in this pot. $100,000 buy-in tournament. King high on the river. Can we pull the trigger here? Oh yeah, Fedor sure can. He's putting the bet together.
Beat 2 bets. 163.
Fedor does bet. 163,000 on the river here. That is a huge bet, and this is an enormous pot. 1.8 million chips in play. There's 400,000 in the middle. If Mike can somehow find this call here, he'll have won about a third of the chips in play this hand.
The river comes in offsuit 3, which is not very relevant for either player. The only thing that might have changed for Fedor is if he had 6-5, he's hit a straight. Other than that, though, all of the draws have bricks, so this is a pretty safe card for Mike Watson all in all. At this point, Mike checks over to Fedor, and now Fedor has a decision to make. Now, in general, while I don't think betting the flop or the turn with King Jack is that good, particularly the turn, on the river it actually makes a decent amount of sense to bluff with this hand. He doesn't have a club in his hand, which means his opponent is a little more likely to have a flush draw that's going to have to fold for sure. And because he has King Jack, it's less likely his opponent has a hand like King 9 or Jack 9, which are hands that would for sure call. So at this point, I don't hate the play, but the problem still remains. He can have a bunch of hands like Jack 10, 10, 8, 8, 6, maybe even some flush draws that he also might want to bluff with. And King Jack still does have, as Jay Carver said in this clip, some chance of winning if he is up against a hand like Jack 10 suited or Jack 8 suited, or really if he just called the turn with 10, 8. Those are all hands that he can still actually beat. So I would probably take my showdown value, but I can understand the merit for firing 165K here on the river. Now over to Mike Watson, and he's in a pretty tough spot. In general, I think a pretty good rule to have in your poker game is when you have top pair, call people down, and when you have second pair, look to probably fold somewhere along the way. However, he is playing a pretty aggressive opponent, and when you open the button, you do have a lot of different hands that all could be bluffing here. So maybe you might reason that a strong second pair needs to be a call down because there are enough bluffs in your opponent's range to where you're happy with it. Now, I will say having the queen in his hand isn't really that relevant either way. I think it would be kind of bad for him to want to call with a hand like, let's say, 8-7, because an 8 would block a bunch of the draws that are more likely to be bluffing. So I could really go either way, and I wonder what he's going to do.
whoever wins this pot is going to be a massive chip leader coming back from the break. Can Mike Watson figure this out? Jack 10 missed, 10-8 missed, 6-8 missed. 5-6 makes a straight, Ace-5 makes a
10
straight.
seconds.
We can't beat sets. We can't beat overpairs if somehow I played an overpair this way. And Mike Watson lets it go. And that is a beautiful play by Fedor. Fired not one bullet, not two bullets, but 3 bullets there to take down an enormous pot before the break. And that is why he is one of the best in the world. Over $20 million in live cashes and counting. Amazing play there.
Man, I guess Mike just doesn't have any moves. Wait. Thank you for joining me for today's Poker Hands, and as always, I'd like to ask, if you have not yet done so, hit that sub button and get notifications for when my new videos go up.